You are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, I had the opportunity to interview Gregory Newson. Gregory is the author of I Get High Watching Paint Dry, and a second book, Painting the Snow Monkey in the Crack Palace, is upcoming. Gregory is one of the more interesting guests I've had the opportunity to interview, and his life story is quite intriguing. I'm here with Gregory Newson, who is a former Black Panther, the author of I Get High Watching Paint Dry, and an artist. Gregory, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I'm Gregory Newson, born, but I've been marketing myself as Uncle Gregory for the last 12 years. As a former Panther follower of Elijah Muhammad, and the education I received in New York rendered me practically a bigot, even though art was something that I could do naturally right from the crib. I had severe learning disabilities and dyslexic, undiagnosed. I started winning art shows and having newspaper clippings written about me as being a Harlem boy as a promising genius, and went on several talk shows. And this went on for about 4 years as a teen, but at 17, 16, unknowing to me, I won a teen art show. And at the same time, puberty was kicking in. I came from a very passive family. So everything I had to learn, I discovered the hard way. I wasn't making money, and I joined the Panthers, but this white guy at the last art show that I won first prize, I heard he read about my article in the Amsterdam News, and he came from Massachusetts to give me a scholarship to the famous artist school in Westport, Connecticut, which was a home correspondence, which that was challenged by itself because you had to read, write back to them, correspond through the mail. So that was something that was very difficult for me to accomplish. I did make note of it or talk about it at a Panther Party meeting, in which my tribe always reflected that there's no Black artist that'll make it in America. White man will not let you be as famous as you think you could be. And plus, can you name one Black American that succeed as an artist and get any notoriety? And of course, they asked me, did this white man give me any money? I said, no, he just gave me a scholarship. And there was a great humor about that and among us tribal participants. And I called the man a honky and other names. Later on, down the road, I quit or got thrown out of the Panthers because I was dealing drugs, and that was a no-no. I was dealing drugs for Nicky Bonds. Anybody look that up, they'll find out this was a national distributor. And I got rounded up and arrested and went to prison, which art saved me from being raped in prison also. But when I got out, I learned that white man that I got the scholarship through the Hamilton Teen Artists Group in Washington Heights. That man that came to give me the scholarship was Norman Rockwell himself. But at that time, my Black community, we knew nothing of Norman Rockwell, Albert Dorn, or any Don King, any of those artists that was famous in the Caucasian world. Let me put it that way. Um, but after I got out of jail, I stopped painting for about 10 years. But I moved out of New York to Jacksonville, Florida, where my ancestors was raised, or slaves down there. And I found out from one of my older relatives that I'm a descendant of a Confederate soldier, which um, I thought that was ridiculous. Don't and told him, don't tell me that again, and stop spreading lies. Um, anyway, so with that said, I'm working and I went on a vacation to Lexington, Virginia, and I accidentally visited Stonewall Jackson's home. It was an accident. And I went in, the curator told me about his Black Sunday school and his relationship with the Black community. And I gathered all the information I could about Stonewall Jackson to read, which greatly improved my reading, hunting down this information. Then it led to Nathan Bedford Forrest, and also the Ku Klux Klan, which when it started was not a racial bent political group. It was something far than what it is. A lot of imitation KKK started popping up after Forrest closed this down. But also watching the 60s and the 50s and the hate thrown towards Martin Luther King's marches and other Black people marches, I felt that I wanted to confront these so-called barbaric people and educate them about the relationship that many of the generals that they admired had with Black folks, with like William McLean, Stonewall Jackson's, I mean, Robert E. Lee's cook and body servant, Jim Lewis, and a whole bunch of Blacks that really show such character, that I thought white folks, Southern white folks, need to know about this. And I decided to confront the most leading organization, not for they're not known for hating or anything. They're called the Sons of the Confederacy. And I started going to Civil War reenactments, historical, and displaying artwork and self-published books, educating. I thought in the beginning I would be educating my own Black community about this very treasure of information that we're not taught in our northern schools. You got to understand, during that time, each state had its own different curriculum of teaching American history, and especially about slavery and the Civil War. Each state, I feel, my northern state presented to us young students a very slanted, cherry pick. That, not saying that the government intentionally wanted to start this divide, but it did. It was the fuel. I mean, you could hear so many of Panther and neighborhood people I grew up with be quoting the school doctrines, education, and our high school and junior high school to build such a nasty resentment towards the South and Southern people. Well, I found out over the 12 years I've been doing this, I have gotten a complete turnaround as to what I've learned, what they've educated me, and what I've dug up myself, that I have built quite a passionate audience for my material, and even home study school parents sought out my website and self-published books, graphic novel books. A DVD is coming out this Friday, by the way. It'll be posted on my website that I'm starring in there as John Jasper, a true documentary. And the name of the DVD is Lincoln's Quest for Empire. I'm quite excited about that. But I had, it's just, I cannot explain um, uh, what's happened to me since those days. And me being the opposite of what I am today is just, is maybe it's evidence that there is a God. Even though I got strong feelings about organized religion, but I'm just stunned as to the development. Not to talk about me spending years being a drug addict and selling drugs to my community and going to prison. I got I got married 3 years ago at a Confederate at a Confederate wedding with cannons and guns and uh, and it's just a remarkable story that I inspired me to write the book. I Get High Watching Paint Dry, which people for 5 years asked me, how did a guy from New York now be in front of Sons of the Confederacy National Convention, so-called people that dislike the African American? You are embraced and loved by them. So that's part of my story.
Without spoiling too much of I Get High Watching Paint Dry, what is your book about?
It's about, it is no fluff, audience. It's for real. It's a real story for real people, and it's about what maybe you've been as a parent, been a drug addict, but you are intimidated to tell the story of what you went through to your kids. You might be embarrassed. This is a type of book you can pass on to your young teen that's coming into puberty and they're hanging out with their friends and they're doing things outside the house that a parent has no control over. I hope my book scares the living daylights out of any kid that desires to be something. Could be a musician, artist, anything talented. You pick up drugs, you start alcohol pursuit with your pastime, your dreams will be deferred. And you may not ever, if you ever recover from this entertainment that you seek when you're bored, you may never be able to come back to the gift that God has planted in your heart to do.
There's going to be a second book in the series that I Get High Watching Paint Dry as part of, and that's going to be called Painting the Snow Monkey in the Crack Palace.
Well,
what will that book be about?
After I went to prison for selling heroin, being addicted, so forth and so on, I got out of prison and started trying to rebuild my life. But during that time, cocaine, the powdered version, was emerging. And the media and many health advisors, which I quote in the book, were stating that it's non-addictive. And I was hanging out with people that we drank and we started out with a little cocaine. And I believe the reports that it was non-addictive. What a piece of lie that was. My pursuit of it as a extra tool when I was painting, staying up all night long, having that extra energy at parties, led to that me thinking that that was a good aid. But it manifests and it grew into a larger monkey than the heroin monkey, which led to an overdose, a rush to the hospital. You have to read it.
How and where did you self-publish I Get High Watching Paint Dry?
I use my own money. How can I say this? I refuse to have a daddy. I'm passionate about marketing for my website. I got one or two distributors. Um, my greatest passion is not to share not share my 60 or 80% of my profits with people that are on the fringes of what I do. So I'm getting a broad education on distribution, web marketing, affiliates. Um, See, I used to be assistant art director of Viking Press in New York City. This is right after Martin Luther King got assassinated. Some of the advertising agencies and publishing companies started opening their doors for blacks. We were literally not existent in these arenas. And I and this seed, even though I have learning and reading difficulties, planted in me a strong desire to be my own boss and have my own publishing company. And of course, I have all kinds of assistants, great editors um, that surround me, marketing people that promote my website, and things that I do on my own. And of course, I attend twice a month. I do about 40,000 miles a year in driving to events. I do about two events a month. I just got back from Arkansas, Sons of the Confederacy National Convention, Civil War reenactments, street fairs. I'm in front of the public, building my email list all the time, selling direct to people, which I don't have to share none of the profits with. And that's become very successful that I'm able to make a living off.
In addition to your work as an author, you're also an artist. Now, do you just do paintings or do you do other forms of creative art?
I do oil painting and digital uh, creation, digital art. I do the digital art for my self-published books because I can move faster. It's the creating artwork is much more forgiving, uh, and that's how I. But I do sell original oil paintings for selective ideas, which I'm very happy with collectors that only buy original paintings. And there are, the remarkable thing is, if I put these paintings on traditional marketing art website, I get zero sales. But when I go to Alabama, Louisiana, whatever, Southern, people walk around in these exhibits or whatever, and they see my artwork. And it seems like it's a special message to people that have a strong um, uh, desire to hang in their home Confederate interpretations of relationship between the South and African Americans. It seemed like these buyers don't go around protesting or trying to convince other people that the South was not as what the winners of the war has described of them. They want this art on their walls. So when people come in a house, they get a sense of their love for their homeland. And also all my framed pictures have little plaques underneath them that describe in detail what the painting represents. And I'm very, very happy about this silent connection like a radio. You have to be tuned in on the right station. You see my stuff. You're Southern born. You're suspicious of the lies, but you're old enough just to keep your mouth shut and just let these young people go around thinking what they think. But in my household, I'm going to hang my true feelings on the wall, and those are the people I connect to.
Now, when you talk about, I'm going to switch subject to slavery in a different part of the world. When you talk about the 1.5 million or so white slaves in Africa, is that referring to the Barbary enslavement and slave trade that existed in northwestern Africa hundreds of years ago?
Yes,
And that's
and
another thing that's not often taught about in world history classes in schools.
well, and they'll try to describe it as, oh, these were Arabs. Those were Africans. Period.
And my final question is, why do most U.S. Southern white people refuse to share their true family relationship with Black Americans dating back to when slavery was legal?
Well, the powers to be, such as NACCP, other uh, now I'm not saying these groups are not doing a great job. They really did penetrate the door, but we are white people in this arena are more interested in preserving the angle of white people were not this bad. They do not hold up. Uh, maybe maybe they feel that's up to you, Uncle Gregory, to portray that. But right now, we're just trying to preserve our young people's idea that the white uh, Southern people were not like the winners of the war portrayed us as. And the winners of the war had historians write a history, and these historians never put foot in the South, never had no connection to spending any time investigating truly their relationship between slave and slave master. And you believe it or not, the ones that the slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation was just a document to create insurrection and to keep France and Britain out of the war were thrown in the drawer. 20,000 slaves did leave the plantations and head north. More than 20,000. But 20,000 died in concentration camps in Nazareth, Mississippi. Anybody can Google um, the Devil's Punch Bowl. It was a description of a concentration camp that was in Mississippi where all these slaves died after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And only a small proportion of those left the plantations and went north. People don't also realize there are actual slave recordings in which I wrote a book. You'll see it on my website of slave recordings that the WPA program before World War II, the president sent out writers with recording equipment to tape record only Southern slaves now that were probably 90, 101, 80, whatever. And the testimonies that these slaves left behind that you can actually go to the Congressional Library and look it up and hear it from the slaves' mouth themselves, which I did a transcript book that helps you understand what they're talking about. It's nothing like Hollywood portrays in their narrative of slavery. in the Southland of America. But
Gregory, oh wait, you're going to, you got more to say?
yeah, and for the Southern people not to eagerly tell the stories that I tell, that's a huge opening in football. That's a huge window of opportunity for me to just run through. And I'm so grateful.
Gregory, you were one of the more interesting guests I've ever interviewed for the Heartland Author podcast, and I thank you for appearing on this podcast.
Well, I thank you for acknowledging what you just said. Um, I've like the truth said, the truth will set you free. I am so grateful to get past bigotry, drug selling, drug addiction, prison, and then go through the cycle again where Oliver North and his team sure helped the painting the snow monkey in the crack palace on government. The whole drug industry, the banks are profiting from this. It's just anyway. That's another subject.
It was wonderful to interview Gregory. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.